The issue I've always kind of had when I look at ARM tutorials and stuff is it's pretty common that I see like, you know, the suggestion is always the tube. And I kind of spoiled this, whatever this is supposed to be, because I drew the solution here. Well, not the solution, but my feeling is that it's better to bake in the profile of an arm by going with an ellipsis and then a rectangle. I think, especially kind of a slightly bowed rectangle, is a better approach to a to the forearm. You know, if you add the fingers here, um, than the standard kind of ellipsis. And I think the reason was, and if you've done enough studying and stuff, you'll see quite often this concept of the forearm being two bones. It's not really what I want to cover, but the idea is that you got this. I don't know how accurate this is. All I know is that when you flip your arm over, this sort of thing happens. One of these stays static, and the other one kind of just flips over. And that's the crazy way people's forearms work. Is this sort of thing happens where you got your hand here, and then actually let's go left. Let's go the thumbs on the side, and then back of the hand. This is this general idea. Although these hands are fucking huge, but this is just generally the idea of how forearms work, which I don't particularly want to cover right now. Um, because it's not really the intent. Oh, too much of my screen showing. I gotta move this. I don't want this much of my. There you go. It's gotta go back like that. Um, I don't want this much. I don't want to kind of cover this really right now. This concept, not particularly, but it is important to understand this kind of idea, if only because what I'm talking about here is an extrapolation of that idea, of that general concept. Um, so, pretty consistently, what I might do is I might just post this brain fart. Part of me wants to kind of expose people to this unfiltered aspect of, like, I don't know, thinking about art and stuff. I think a lot of things are kind of pretty slickly put together, and even that's sort of intimidating to me to imagine myself having to assemble all my art thoughts like consistently is already kind of part of the problem why I'm having such an issue making these sorts of videos or tutorials, is because there's definitely an anxiety that's built up over presenting this online in a way that's consistent with people's expectations. But the reality is that that's just prevented me from actually posting it at all. So it's not really to anyone's benefit that I don't post this sort of information either. So part of me wants to kind of just muscle through this, conceptually speaking, in a stream of thought, and then maybe just straight up post the raw, slightly edited, but the raw of that, uh, on the YouTube and be like, "Hey, this is an idea I'm working on. What do you guys think? What are the parts?" And then just kind of make this a two-tier process. I could have it on a different channel, and then people can maybe reflect on what I've said so far, and I can maybe tidy up the idea. But I find myself having a real hard time being kind of like isolated in my office, um, trying to get these ideas out. So you'll see me kind of do so as I've been talking. You'll notice I've been drawing these sorts of lines and stuff, and I can sort of talk about this a little bit. It's more of a thing I've been doing recently, something kind of a new thing I've taught myself, but and I've talked about it in my streams before. Uh, but essentially, as this is the focus of the forearm, I'm going to just discuss basically the most straight simplest way to build a forearm. Like, so let's say this is the upper arm. All right. Okay, nothing fancy here. I don't want to focus on that. And then, so what I've been doing a lot is actually drawing straight lines. Not always, but definitely when I'm not too confident, or I'm in a situation where I want to really be sure I'm doing something correctly. I know, I draw the line first because it's important. It's a thing I've been doing recently, and I'm going to talk about this specifically at some other time. But this idea of having joints, learning to line up your limbs and your objects, your approximations to exacting standards. Something I used to do quite often is just kind of draw a line and then, wibbly wobbly put things around it. But ultimately, this is useless. This font serves no function. What's the point of drawing that line? It's the same thing, with the X in the face. People draw the X in the face and then they put their features wherever the hell they want. Ultimately, it becomes a kind of pointless crutch. So what I've started doing recently, especially when it comes to being kind of creating accurate limbs, is learning to draw essentially this sort of shape. Same thing for, like, let's say I'm drawing, legs, and I try to imagine where the knee is straight cut, and I follow and I make sure that I'm always doing a 90-degree angle thing, sort of like this. Always. This is actually super important to me now. It's become very important to me now. I actually think learning to have at least some mathematical accuracy with your illustration is pretty important. So the idea, generally speaking, is thanks the other people who join. Just be sure to, I don't know if the chat is turned on or not, but if you can just let me voice and not input on the voice, that'd be good. But if you want to talk in the chat room, I forgot if there's a way to use the voice chat, not the actual in-thing chat, because then I have to pop up the chat thing and it's a big headache. I know it's not convenient to everyone, but the voice chat's a better option. Otherwise, I can't really see how things are going correctly. I'll check it from time to time. Anyway, so the point I'm making here is, I'm going to actually make this a little longer because I know that's already not correct. The point I'm making is that it's important for me to do this sort of thing now, where I am when I make like an approximation of where the limb is going, and I draw a straight line, then I build around that. Instead of the standard, which is you see quite often, is to draw, the rectangle or the tube. And the reason I want this is for a few reasons. One, it allows me to put, usually, sorry, I'm going to back up here. My brain is fucking going 100 miles a minute because of my ADHD. But usually what you'll see with limbs and stuff, arms and stuff, is you'll see something like this. I'm still using straight lines, but you'll see like essentially a circle, and then the people will just bottle end or circles. I'm not quite sure. I guess it's like, just generally speaking, you kind of go like, oh, my arms are here and here, and then you connect those points, which fine, whatever, that's okay. What I'm showing here, I need to clarify, is not. It's hard to just explain this, but it's I've been really kind of focused on having a solid way to get myself out of trouble, not as a way to overcomplicate my normal drawing process. So when you're watching me draw all these like straight lines, I don't want you to get the wrong impression that I'm drawing straight lines all the time. I'm really not. The goal of this sort of thing, of drawing this sort of thing, is because I actually want to plant an ellipsis. Because once you learn to draw this sort of accurate shape, you can now easily set, use not only like perspective of an object, you can do the wine glass effect. I'll explain that in a second, but you could also even kind of push your FOV if you apply it in this sort of way. The wine glass effect, by the way, I'll just explain it really quickly, is, if you're looking at a wine glass, the dead on to the lid, to the opening, it'll look like that. But by the time you get to not the stem, the ass, the ass of the cup. The base. I assume it's just called the base. A lot of it's exposed at the bottom. You see how there's only this much visible here, whereas there's this much visible here. I'm exaggerating a little bit, to prove a point, but this is how things look if you're close enough to things, pretty consistently. And it's important to understand, even in a cartoonish way, in a stylistic way, that this is happening to your character, and limbs and anatomy all the time. And I don't think people are have systems in place to allow them to always be cognizant of that. So what this sort of line system does is that it allows me to build. So if I have an arm here and I want the arm to be, the arm's supposed to be facing me, then it can make the ellipsis. Remember, the line has to go through the center here. This is the center here. I can draw the ellipsis towards me, so now I can have a very shuttle towards me angle. Or if the intent is for it to go away, same thing, except I'm going to lower this line down a bit more like this, so that it starts at this point, to make room for the joint being hidden. And then, same thing, it's just going a different angle, maybe add a little bit more shrinking. But generally speaking, and then you can go like this. So generally speaking, the idea is that starting with a line allows you to plant, and then putting two perpendicular lines that reflect the termination point, and then drawing that ellipse there, I believe is a much more consistent way. This time I was trying to see if I can draw the arm. So I made this a little bigger because I'm trying to show like the forearm pointing towards the camera here. Is a much more consistent way to build all these components in if you're going to construct this out of 3D pieces. But the truth is that the ellipsis, I've been saying ellipsis, the ellipse, is more powerful than the circle. And I think learning to draw an ellipse is the better path. Now this is all in relation. All of this is in relation to me wanting to talk about forearms, which is kind of silly, but I guess you kind of have to get to that point. So one thing, the reason I wanted to get to this point is that if you do draw these components the way I instructed, then you're allowing yourself to find midpoints like this. So if you're wondering what I'm doing here, so here, this is a cylinder going away from us, and if we draw this component, we now know our midpoint in perspective. And you don't have to draw this. Quite often, you can just do this, and the other one will be approximately in the right spot. But the reason you'd want to do that is because I'm going to erase this because it's not accurate to what I'm trying to describe. The reason you'd want this is because I want to discuss somewhat, to some extent, the forearm. And it's how I feel probably is the better way to approximate this, and you can kind of see it here, which is to use an ellipsis, and instead of another ellipsis, is to use a rectangle, and then you can just attach the two. And then if you approach this like this, and then now you know where the center line is. And the reason you want to know that is because, believe it or not, it gives you a lot of information about where the muscle stops. So the muscle on the forearm is pretty consistently tucks in and turns into tendons about halfway through. So if you're looking at an arm here, you'll have, this side here will have all the muscles, and the hand side will have all the, everything would kind of tuck in and become tendons and so forth. So anyway, the point of saying that, let me just shrink that because the hand's too big, sorry. The point of saying that is essentially the reason why you'd want to kind of have this extrapolation method is because now you can kind of create your midpoint. And that allows you to not only better assess and build the muscle, the forearm muscle bit, and then the part that joins into the hand, but the rectangle also reinforces the way that the arm flops. The way that the forearm bones flop over as you flip your hand over, which is, the part, what the rectangle is doing. What the rectangle is doing is forcing you to realize, to always draw. So let's say, for instance, if I'm drawing an arm, and I draw. So here earlier you saw me draw an oval and a rectangle. Sorry, an ellipse and then a rectangle, but you can start with whichever way you want, really. And let's say I know that the hand has to face this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw the rectangle this way. And then I'm going to just connect these bits real quick. I'm going to redraw this because it's a bit of a mess. And actually I'm going to draw this line again. My timer went off. So I'm going to draw this again. So here's the oval, here's the rectangle. And then once again, if you draw this, you can find the midpoint. So the midpoint's approximately around here. So then you can tuck this all into the bone, into the hand, and then put the hand here. Sorry. I was putting it in the wrong spot. So conceptually speaking, what I'm trying to communicate is this idea. I don't know specifically how to communicate it elegantly, but this is kind of what's been on my mind and what I want to communicate. So, for instance, if I draw this again and I move this way, I draw a rectangle this way. The upper arm hasn't moved. But now I have a new, how like here I have this sort of shape. I have it's pretty obvious the arm is pinching in here and going like this. But no, I have this really wide aspect of the arm. And this part, the top part hasn't moved. The nail in the hand's pointing this way. So could this is this sort of information, if you just kind of use if you're just going to be using, socket to sorry, sphere to sphere or ellipse to ellipse, you're not going to get that extra free kind of shape information. uh Sorry, I know this is kind of lazy. I just don't really want to redraw this hand, although I really feel I should. So this is in a hand drawing tutorial. Hands are always difficult to draw. I don't think I'll ever nail them, but I've gotten much better and closer recently. They're just sausages, guys. Anyway, point is that you can have this idea where, if someone's moving their hand around, and I think this specifically is more useful, especially in animation, but you can keep this upper arm area pretty stationary, and then if you just kind of ensure that the second part of the arm is expressed as a thin rectangle, I think you're better off at communicating what a forearm really is, versus what I normally see and what I see taught, which is this sort of thing. And I don't think this sort of thing can communicate the additional topographical information you'll find in the forearm. And I actually don't think you need much more information than those two kind of shapes, so the ellipsis and the rectangle. So how you use this information, I don't know how I'm going to package this information for a fucking YouTube video. Who fucking knows? But I do think I'm just gonna post this with a caveat at the front being like, hey guys, like, I'm trying to get these done and I'm just trying to bulldoze my way through the process to get to something. So here's the raw thing, and let me know your thoughts on how to approach this, or if you got some tips on communicating better, because believe it or not, I don't consider myself a very good, I think I'm a okay enough hands-on teacher. I don't know if I'm a very good general communicator, or at least I don't find myself able to communicate. Yeah, I know, but you see, here's the thing: is I'm going to put this on YouTube, and it's going to just have me prattling on and on and on, like a psychopath. But at some point, maybe I can talk to someone about shortening the clip, editing it. Maybe I can find an editor who will work for very little. But I do feel that there is a lot to be gained with starting to find really like simplified ways of explaining, of extrapolating, anatomy by using simplified shapes in a way that forces you to adopt topography based on those constraints. So because the rectangle is always there at the base where it connects to the hand, you really kind of it's almost like kind of I don't want to say it's freebie, but it kind of it's kind of a freebie shape. Because really a forearm is this. You can look at your forearm now, and it goes from a big tube to kind of an oval, and you can add an elbow here if you want it. If you really want to sell it. and then the rest can connect up to that. But I think it definitely helps you also kind of pre-visualize what you're drawing, specifically with how where you're going to put that rectangle if you're going to use this method. Because quite often I find myself in a situation where, one of my biggest issues I've had as an artist that I've been like working very hard to defeat, um, is this idea of not being able to visualize what I'm drawing. Um, and the other issue has been, of course, as I've discussed, not having solid rules I can fall back on. But with like something like this, with using a method where there's like one of the components really needs to be cemented in place conceptually, what that allows me to do is now when I draw this, I know the hand has to be in a the hand has a very specific range it can sit in now, and I have to kind of obey that. And it also means that I have to, when I do this shape, it's because I have a goal in mind of what that hand's doing. So, for instance, if I need a hand that's, if I have a person whose hand's on their chest, so I'm just going to draw a hand here very quick. Assume this is someone's hand on their chest. I'm not going to draw the whole person. All right, but let's say I hadn't drawn the hand yet, but let's say I had just drawn the arm. But if I draw the arm, I can immediately be like, okay, the hand's going to be on the chest. I can immediately kind of see how that arm is supposed to look now, and I can solidify my concepts right away. By drawing the shape that really needs to fit into that hand position that I've already kind of have in mind. So it's like reaffirming your mental imagery, and it's kind of committing to something prior to drawing the next component, allowing you to build upon it as well. So for specifically, when you're drawing, it's easy to kind of sorry, if you're just using kind of loose shapes and ovals, you can't chain. I've kind of stumbled across this idea of chaining, allowing yourself to build a body from one part to the next by having the anatomy chain across the whole body, so that if you start, you can draw a whole body starting at a wrist, and you can draw a wrist starting from the pelvis. All those pieces have relations, and once you've kind of created a simplified set of rules that are based on some level of rigid, breakdown, you can comfortably and safely go from one side of the body to the other and build it without having to panic about, oh, am I going to do the arm right? Am I going to do this right? Am I going to do, because that if you can't draw arm right, if you're having a hard time placing a forearm, if you're having a hard time, the shoulder doesn't seem right, but that if you draw the forearm in a certain way and those pieces fall together and the relationships of those pieces are done in a specific way, that you can construct your way upwards or downwards and reinforce things to be true. And then by the time you get to that shape, that second part of the body or whatever, you've built enough key points, that what needs to be there by the time you get there, because you got enough You've got enough like of a landing strip, or you've got enough substructure across a lot of your anatomy. So here I'm going to show you. So here I was drawing an arm just kind of sloppily, like I used to do. But if I were to give it some proper rules here, with some proper rules, here, let's go down to here. So about here. So if I follow the rules that I've just discussed, and I apply, and then I don't know the hand should go here. So probably something like this. And then I can actually got to make sure it actually follows the thing. So then I can actually follow the rules I've set for myself. And I have like real understanding of that sort of those components to draw those pieces. Here I'm having an issues because actually, yeah. So the reason why I'm having issues because it felt off, and it's because I know that if I can see this much of the back, by the time it comes to the center of the screen, if this is a straight shape, then the opening of the wine glass should be near closed. So that's what I'm talking about. Where I've built. If you build yourself some systems that are, I know this to be true, thus it cannot be wrong, sort of deal. And then you can attach the rest and so forth. I'm kind of overworking this. There's a bit of anxiety as I'm teaching this because I feel like I don't want to, seem like a liar but I'm a drawer, I'm an artist, and I'm never perfect. So mostly what I'm trying to do is just show it's about um, just having enough of those tools to kind of be right most of the time. Um, but even here, I'm using landmarks I know about. I'm using the anvil, and I know that this comes around here. Then I know that this pec will go around here because I know where this pec should be. So everything really is about building all the shapes across building across the whole structure, and then as you build, you if you know things to be true from a mathematical, mechanical perspective, then you can have some confidence. Same thing with I used to not do this sort of thing, but I do this a lot more now, where I'm just going to draw a straight ass line across something because I know that this sort of I know where these landmarks should be, and I know that they're parallel. And same thing here. You can kind of correct shoulder placement, unless one shoulder is higher than the other, and then there's other things to worry about. But definitely been a lot more ready to introduce this sort of thing into my art. Mostly because when it comes down to, I'm going to stop fiddling with this because it's just it's getting worse. As I'm doing the thing you do when you doodle and you're talking to someone on the phone, and then your doodle gets crazy. Anyway, the point I'm making here is that it's important, I think, to really learn to extrapolate your shapes in a way that it gives you kind of a mathematical out. Just like people draw palms as this kind of like flat, some kind of like rounded, shape. You don't draw a palm out of Sears. You draw it out of this sort of thing, and then you attach the fingers here, whatever. I think it's important that you really have a good idea, really settle on on a distinctive and on a very elegant and descriptive shape that isn't overcomplicated, isn't and it is easily met, and is a drawing you can draw correctly. And by that I mean it's a drawing that I can go in a 3D program and model it and show how I drew it wrong and correct myself. Um, I haven't spoken a lot about the correcting pass on art, on learning art, but I do believe that the most you will ever learn with art is when you're correcting your mistakes. And I think that correction path is probably the most intrinsically important. And I think a lot of people don't do it. I think a lot of people reference images and then draw things they like. And then ultimately, it's not fun to correct how wrong you are. And then so people don't. And that's fine. I don't particularly want to tell people what to do with their art. But if you're looking to improve, um, then you're really going to have to start integrating a learning pass, a correction pass into your process. But that's about it. So I'm gonna wrap it up at this point. How much did I record? And then I'm just gonna post this fucking thing. 42. Holy fuck. See, this is what I'm talking about. 42. I didn't even notice I was talking for 42 minutes. What a friggin' disaster. Um, but this needs to be condensed into something that isn't a rambly nonsense. So I think maybe I can. I really feel like I need someone else to help me out with this at this point, or maybe I can communicate with someone, or maybe someone who makes these already, and they could give me some guidance. Because as much as I was able to make those tutorials back in the day, I'm finding myself having a pretty hard time. I don't know if it's just I'm older or my brain's gotten even worse, but it's very hard for me recently to kind of put put all my thoughts in a row, if that makes any sense. So what I think I'm going to do is just post this and get some feedback, and maybe get some feedback and maybe talk about it tomorrow. Get me to get some feedback from people tomorrow. Maybe just maybe someone out there can help me. I'd really like to work with someone on this, so that I can kind of have a secondary perspective on the process. I feel like when I'm doing this alone, I feel like that's really the ultimate killer to this process, because just, teaching to nothing is brutal. I don't know. It doesn't work for me very well. But I'm rambling now, mostly because I'm trying to work out all these ideas, I guess, as I talk about. Anyway, so if you're on YouTube and you're watching this and you're like, this guy won't shut the fuck up, now you know why. But hopefully what we have so far is enough to kind of build a proper, 10, 12-minute tutorial. But frankly, I know there are people out there who like this longer form sort of thing, mostly because it helps them understand the kind of mental processes that artists go through that they might not be aware of. All right, thanks guys. Talk to you later.